So thank you to Zhai-McCartney for joining us today. You are
Very
the
welcome.
founder and director of Atlas Therapy Coaching here in Singapore. So for those in the audience who may be unfamiliar with you and your work, who are you and what is the focus of your practice?
Okay, who am I? I am a investment professional turned psychotherapist and coach. And I think my focus is really people maybe like you and me, high achieving, went to a good school, worked in a very demanding environment. I worked in, global investment banks and asset management firms. You worked in at Google, big
Yes.
tech. And then more specifically, I work with people who come from a mixed international background. In my case, I grew up in China. I moved to the US at 18. I came back to Asia to work. And in that process, the cultural linguistic adjustments, they put certain stresses and demands. And what I found before I came into career is that it's very hard for us to find somebody who gets who gets our issues. So that might be just friends, right? People who don't have to worry about visas or code switch between home language and work language. Romantic partners, certainly it's very hard to find somebody to kind of fit all your identities.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like professional help, if you want to get a therapist or a coach and they just don't get the complexity of your life, I found there was a shortage of that in Singapore, which is such a melting pot. We have so many intercultural people and intercultural relationships. So that, I naturally gravitated toward that and I'm really enjoying it. So I help people with relational problems, whether you're building a team at work, building a marriage at home, building a relationship. And I also help people with general stress management, the usual gamut of what you would think a psychotherapist does.
And I'm so happy, I think, that you decided to get into this field because you're right. It's really hard, right, to
Yeah.
find somebody who has that shared cultural context. And I wanted to talk to you about your different moves
Yeah.
because I think a lot of folks, in the audience are curious about those who have moved, all
Yeah.
over like us. And so you moved to the United States, then you moved to Europe, and now you're here in Singapore. And along the way, you transitioned, as you mentioned, from this high-powered, finance career to mental health and mental therapy. So, what was your inflection point? Like,
Yeah.
how did you arrive at the, career switch moment?
So there's a clear arc in retrospect, right? I'm a bit older than you, so I'm 45 this year. And in this moment, looking back, I'm like, oh, there was an arc, there was a clear inflection. But I would say through most of my 20s and 30s, I was like, where's this winding path going? The geographic relocations, I think the inflection was really 18. I went to California. I started at my first year at Stanford. It was a lot, right? It was exciting, but it was also an environment that was so competitive and so diverse compared to what I was used to. So while I was adjusting to all that, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And then, so it layered on this complexity of, okay, I have to do the thing that I was taught to do by a good, be a good Chinese girl, fulfill the Chinese family dream, which was get straight A's, get into a good university, graduate, and have a good job. So I was focused on that, but then at the same time also trying to like help manage my dad's care and can they afford to go to the US to get an oncology appointment or should we have it all done in China? There was that. By the time I graduated and started working in New York, his cancer had accelerated and become terminal. So then I was really kind of simultaneously trying to hold on to a good American job. Back then, I think the job market in China and Singapore was not the same as in the US. So to justify my expensive American education, I felt like I actually need to get a job that pays me an amount that, makes sense given how much, we had invested into the education. So on the one hand, I was trying to excel at my job in New York, but also wanting to be home to spend time with my dad. So that prompted the first move to Singapore, where I took the red-eye flight every weekend to see my dad in hospice in China. And then I came back Monday morning, showered at the office, repeated that. That went on for 5-6 months, which was very tough, but it's one of the best things I've done because I hadn't gotten to see my parents that much. So after my dad passed away, that's where I think the career inflection started, but I didn't know it was going to be that because it was 12 years of me reading philosophy, studying psychology and also delving into religion.
Okay.
Really trying to make sense of what is the purpose of life, right?
Yeah.
If a good person who works so hard can live just half of a life, what am I doing with my time? And that kind of persisted through over a decade of studying psychology part-time. I like the structure and science of it.
Yeah.
It was a bit more appealing. And I also couldn't see myself as like a modern day philosopher or a modern day, seminarian. Like that didn't feel like a career path. So by the time I graduated from my second master's program in psychology, I was 40. And my husband basically asked me, he said, are you going to finish and do something with it? Or is that just all for fun? And that was kind of my aha moment, like, okay, I could leave this finance career. I was at a point that I was happy with and thought I could then develop a whole other second life that's more, I think, emotionally fulfilling after a very quantitative, intellectually fulfilling career.
Yeah. That's such a fact.
It's a long story.
No, but
yeah.
I'm so glad you shared it, and I appreciate the vulnerability. And I think wow. I mean, like that confrontation with mortality, I feel like is
Yes,
something, that
absolutely.
makes people reassess.
Absolutely.
So yeah, did you feel like, were you still working in banking when you moved to Singapore?
Yeah. So I basically worked full time throughout. And that's also why my career inflection took so long, because I was enrolled in a program that, had I done it full time in the States, would have been 3 years to get a master's in a field that allows me to work as a therapist.
Yeah.
But because I was still full time in finance, I had, I think, 5 international moves during that degree. So I would
Wow.
skip some semesters, I would transfer universities, lose some credits. And my finance career, I think similar to your previous career, I had meetings and offsites and conferences booked a year in advance. So there were semesters where I just couldn't make any of the grad school classes. So I was always working in finance. Yeah.
Man, I admire that so much. That's
Yeah.
I can't imagine the amount of effort and like the emotional labor that goes along with it.
It was effort, but I think it, in a way, kept me balanced. When I was working in finance, something I felt very keenly was I wanted something else. The left brain was so overstimulated during the week that on the weekends I wanted to engage in more right brain stimulation. And I couldn't really find that in most of my finance peer groups. So the studying, while it was time and effort, it also gave me the balance that I needed. I remember having with a very good friend of mine who's Polish, but then immigrated to the US as a grown-up as well. I had this long debate with him. I was like, why do you stay in finance, right? What is the meaning of it for you? And he talked about how he saw the efficient allocation of capital as his way of helping humanity. And I was like, I get that, right? I can see there's purpose in that, because I couldn't really find purpose in, I'm going to help people invest and make more money. But usually maybe they're like very wealthy people who don't need more money. Like, what is the meaning of this? But I didn't fully embrace that the efficient allocation of capital was my life's purpose.
Right.
So I kept going and like trying to find my answer.
Yeah. That's fascinating. My brother works at a hedge fund, and I think he might feel similarly to your friend.
Yeah. And I love people who have that level of clarity, right? I respect that. And I think so much of my work is around self-knowledge and self-clarity.
Yeah.
Just because it works for your brother doesn't mean that it's meaningful and fulfilling for you.
Yeah.
Life is hard enough. If we're trying to do something according to a social script or somebody else's values, it's hard.
Yeah.
But if it comes from inside that we really enjoy and find meaning in the thing that we're doing, it's easy.
Absolutely.
So even though it was a lot of years of juggling multiple things, it was in a sense easy because I wanted to do it.
I love that. I wanted to ask you about this sense of identity as well, right? Because I think so many folks tie it into their career.
Careers. Yeah.
And so when you go to a new place, like when I first moved to Paris, I had this natural, sort of reset moment where I got to question, what do I really value? Is this career taking me, where I want to head as a person? And ultimately decided no and decided to try something else. So
what was your French name? Because Ian is very hard for French people. My name is also very hard for French people.
I ended up saying Yen.
Yen.
Yeah,
Okay.
like the
So,
Y-A-N.
and a little bit like German, a more European version of it, right? Yeah.
What was yours?
Well, so QI in French would be pronounced as key, which if you speak French, this means who. So the bane of my existence as a student of French for many years was the teacher would get to the end of the roster and be like, qui? Like who? And I'd be like, me. And it just went on in this comic cycle of like, who? Me. Stop saying it wrong. It's me. Yeah.
It's like that
Yeah.
can't feel skin. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
funny. Okay.
Yeah.
So how, like in your practice, right, do you encounter this often when people are sort of resetting their identities?
Yeah.
If they're in between careers, they
Yeah,
take
yeah.
this opportunity to, experiment, and how does that play out?
Absolutely. I think a geographic move is the easiest way to press reset. You don't have the history, you don't have the social penalty of, if you were known as the nerd or the chubby kid or whatever when you were growing up, here's your chance to reinvent yourself. You can have a new name, you can dress differently, you can make new friends. I think those of us who maybe went to university in the US, we have this freshman year experience, right?
Yeah.
Where in hindsight, so I see now, because we're fully grown, that so many of my freshman year classmates were in fact experimenting with an identity. There are some really good things about it, right? People who get the chance to do that can really try something new and see if it answers the question in their heart, in their mind. But there's also a tax that comes with it, right? Yeah.
What is the tax? Talk to me a bit more about that.
So for international people, or third culture kids, whatever term you identify with, you have this great gift, which is you have learned to become a social chameleon. You can pick up, I don't even notice it, but I know I do it. When I speak with you, I'm sounding more American, but when I speak at home with my husband, who's British, my English is more neutral. And then when I'm, with different kinds of Chinese people, they will comment, oh, you sound like a Singaporean Chinese, versus in my hometown in Harbin, people are like, oh, you left all these years, you never lost your accent. So that's my cultural linguistic chameleon coming out. So I'm good at adapting to new environments. I can assimilate very easily. I'm sure the same is true for you. But the flip side of that, especially when we're younger, is it's very easy to become rootless and to pander too much to what others want, to over assimilate to the point of losing yourself. And when at my age, maybe I have a clear sense of my identity, so I can do the assimilation, but I know who I am at my core. But if you're a young adult in your 20s and your 30s, you don't really yet know who you are. So that skill becomes a bit of a tax, because you kind of go home with this rootless feeling of, did I like the person that I just presented myself as? Or why do I naturally kind of just go with the flow in the conversation instead of sticking to my guns? It's subtle, but I think it starts affecting us more and more, because going back to our early discussion about what is intrinsic to you, you have to know who you are to pursue the thing that you want. And if you spend too much of your time trying to fit in, you kind of lose sight of developing your own value system and finding your path.
I really resonate with this idea that, you could leave a conversation and be like, that wasn't who I was. Like, I just put on, a different personality. But at least for me, I think sometimes in those moments of self-betrayal is when I actually, it's like my signpost.
Where you
That,
learn
hey,
who I am,
that
in
was
opposition to who
awful.
you're not, right? I
Exactly.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So,
That's true.
so how, like, is that the only way to learn, or are there ways that people can be more proactive about discovering it?
So I use a framework in my own work, right? That's 3 parts: awareness, articulation, and then action. And I think what you're describing is awareness. It's step 1. You notice after that interaction that that's not who you are. Some people are very sociable. Some people are experiential learners. I'm one. So I have to do it to feel it, to convince myself.
Me too.
Many people are more like textbook or visual learners. If someone tells them, hey, this might happen to you, that's sufficient for them. So I guess the short answer is no, that's not the only way to learn, but it is a great way to learn. And as we get older and older, we live in the age of, big data, AI, science, technology. We so think that we are rational, objective creatures functioning to the principles of physics and mathematics. But that the most important decisions in our lives, the highest stakes psychological, emotional decisions we make, are actually informed by our emotional and intuitive intelligence. It's not cognitive, right? When I ask somebody, who are you going to marry? Yes, many people have made a pros and cons list, but very few people, none, will tell me, well, on this list, this partner had 10 pros and 11 cons, so I'm not going to marry them, right? It's a feeling, and that feeling we can most easily get by being in the physical experience of that interaction, and then walking away and reflecting, developing self-awareness on, did I feel good or bad? Did I feel confused, fulfilled, overjoyed,
Yeah.
that informs us.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I want to talk to you about this partnership thing because you just brought up marriage. And I feel like in Singapore, but just increasingly now, there's so many of these cross-cultural
Oh, yeah.
couples.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I met my girlfriend in Spain
Yeah.
and France, and
Yeah.
so we've had to negotiate a whole bunch of, cross-cultural barriers.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that shows up in your practice as well, and you know,
100%, right? This is my bread and butter.
yeah, yeah.
And so not too long ago, towards the end of last year, I gave a keynote speech at the National Counseling and Psychotherapy Conference in Singapore. And my speech, I titled it, What's Normal Anyway? Cross-cultural relationship building.
Okay.
And when I first presented that topic to the event organizers, they were like, well, maybe the audience will be 50% Singaporean corporate leaders. And I was like, bear with me, this is gonna click. And the topic clicked because even if you and your girlfriend were double Singapore born and raised, if you walk into the Google office during the day, that means at breakfast, you're Singlish speaking, you're Singaporean behaving. And then when you're interacting with your international or American colleagues in a company that's very much culturally American, you are having to change the way you speak, not just accent, but how direct you are. Are you using subject, verb, object, which is very American English construct, right? I do this, whereas even British English is more passive. It was done to me, which is a little bit more humble, a little bit less like in your face. And, if you work with Chinese people, then in China, I've been asked many times to translate meetings for investors and companies that we're investing in. And I have to change. I don't go, why didn't you guys earn, grow your profits last quarter? That's so confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
The culturally acceptable way to say that is, why didn't we grow? As if I'm part of the company. So I think I lost track of your question. But my point is that cultural code switching happens to everybody in Singapore, right? It's not just the minority of people like us who are in interracial, international, cultural relationships. I think it affects everybody. And it's the tax, right? That adaptation tax is heavier than most of us know, right? And I didn't learn this about myself until I went to my first therapist. This was after my father passed away, and I just was going through a lot of stuff. And within 10 minutes of meeting that therapist, she said, okay, let me get this right. At your job, you're an American, very can-do person. Then you go home to your mom's apartment where you have to be like a little bit softer, more obedient Chinese girl.
Daughter.
And then you have a European partner. So then you have to be yet someone else with him. So in one day, you're living 3 lives. No wonder you're exhausted. And I was like, wow, okay, that's true. And I just want to make your audience, everybody, aware that if you are living in this environment, working in a job that, it has different cultural and linguistic groups in it, you are living that adaptation tax. It does take something from you. It's a great talent, but we have to also manage our own energy levels to make sure that we can sustain working in this way without burning out or, getting depressed, overstressed.
Yeah, it's like the baseline tax.
It's
just higher.
Yeah, it is just higher because you have to think, right? Who am I talking to? What should I say? How should I say it? My facial expressions, my gestures, everything changes, right?
And you mentioned burnout, which is another topic I wanted to talk to you about. I feel like just in my short time here in Singapore, so many of my friends
Everybody's burned out.
achieving. There is a lot of
Yeah.
burnout. And I think part of it maybe is just the culture of Singapore. It seems, quite corporate in the expat circles. And I guess I'm just curious, are there early warning signs that people should be, aware of and how to prevent it if possible?
Yeah, I think that burnout, there's a reason companies like McKinsey or Google offer something explicitly or implicitly called a burnout leave, because we recognize with these high achieving jobs, high stress, individuals, they can love their job, they can do it well, but they may still, kind of crash and need a reset. So the signs of burnout, I think, are very much physical, right? You're getting enough hours of sleep, but you feel every morning fatigued and tired, right? Like you could use another day, another vacation, right? There's that. There are the emotional. If you go to your doctor's office or if you go to see a psychologist or a counselor like myself, we would run you through an assessment of emotional indicators. How many times this week have you not enjoyed something that you have in the past enjoyed, right? How many times did you feel like doing X? Did you feel like Y? Those are kind of the checklists. For, I think, most of my clients, we are quite unaware and we are so used to pushing through, right? We were rewarded. If you push through, get 100%, get it perfect, you get the good job. We don't know how to do it otherwise. So they don't want to even mentally say this word like maybe I'm burned out because that's a weakness, or you're not hungry for the job. That was a big finance term. Are you hungry for the work, right? There's always somebody more hungry than you. So I think for those people, how it manifests when they first come to see me is I just feel off. Something just feels wrong. I feel stuck. I don't understand why I'm like this, right? I'm doing great at my job. I got good reviews. I'm not doing more than anybody else. And it's a self-doubt. We're basically saying there must be something wrong with me. But if we look at the picture, there's a well-known quote in my industry, which is maybe insanity is the only sane response to an insane world, right? The way we work now is just so intense that if you weren't feeling a bit off or burned out, that would be strange.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe the biggest impediment to identifying burnout is this script we have in our heads. You are not allowed to do that. If you do that, you are weak, you are incompetent, you are soft. And we often compare, right? Oh, all my friends can do this. How come I can't? Everybody has a different baseline. Everybody has different psychological baggage, like those adaptation taxes or other things that are unique to your family and personal history. And everybody has a different physical constitution as well. So burnout is not an absolute measure. It's a subjective measure, person by person.
Wow. No, I really love the way you frame these things. I think it's very articulate, clear. So I think another topic that comes up is this idea of when you move abroad, there's differences in the experience, and maternal health I think is a really big one.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if you're far away, right, from your existing hospital network and all the doctors you're familiar with, that could be really difficult. So this is one of your, specialties. Can you talk a bit about what you see, and in particular, what women might overlook or not expect when they come to you?
You're right. Maternal mental health has become much more of a topic. Maternity leave globally in terms of legal and just company policies has been improving. What's still lagging is the paternal leave part of it. And that's important because when I was in my late 20s, I went to one of my close friends' weddings in Sweden. And for their bachelorette party, rather than going to a club and, getting smashed, she invited a member of parliament who was a part of the feminist party in Sweden to come speak to us. So we had like a salon kind of party. And it opened my eyes. The thing that she was fighting for, this parliamentarian that year, that election year, was rather than in Sweden, each parent gets a year leave, but the men have the option of donating their leave to the women, which sounds like such a nice thing, right? I was like, oh, that's so nice to have 2 years of leave. What she was proposing to do was to have the men mandatory serve some of their leave. And why is that important? Because if we look at global divorce rates, we're running about 50%. And when we look at the economics of, pay compensation, women start out already underpaid. And then with every leave of absence from the workplace, your trajectory kind of, if this is a linear path taken by, let's say, a man or a woman who didn't take any maternity leave or pregnancy, doctor's appointments, all of these things, if your pay goes like this, but if you're a working mother, you start here, and then with every leave, you kind of either plateau or come down. Over lifetime, that financial outcome is vastly different. And then in the divorce settlements, we don't account for all that, right? So, and psychologically, from a family building perspective, children deserve to have that bonding time equally with the fathers. And anyone who's had a baby, right, the most feminist of husbands, I like to say the best husband can do at most 49% of the work, because we are given the leave. So we start by learning and figuring out how to do it. And then by the time the men take their 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever they're allotted, they're catching up. So this invisible labor, this mental tax on mothers if you survey anybody, I can almost guarantee that who buys the kids shoes when the shoes get too small? It's going to be the mom. Who does, the play date organizing? It's going to be the mom. Who remembers the names of all the classmates? It's going to be the mom. Who, keeps in touch with all of the other kids' parents, not because they particularly like them, but because they have to, right?
Yeah.
For their kids' sake. It's going to be the mom. And there's a recent TV show called All Her Fault, which is really the first pop culture kind of content that I've seen address this issue, right? So really worth watching. So all that is to say, motherhood, parenthood is one of the loneliest phases of your life, right? You are suddenly cut off from your workplace, from your friends. Your baby's maybe feeding every 2 hours, so you can't even go outside or go to the bathroom by yourself. So there is really no identity. For 9.5 months, you're incubating. So you're biologically, your identity has merged with this being. And then for the 1 month, 4 months, 6 months, whatever maternity leave time you have, you are still strapped to this being, which makes it very hard to have a sense of self. And if you take that in an expat relocation context, even more so, right? You don't even have a familiar neighbor. You don't have any friends to go out with. You don't have your family members to give you a hand and give you a break. Everything is new. And at the same time, you're navigating a new body after birth. You're navigating a new mind space. You're navigating a new identity. So many of my working professional, mothers, clients, when they come in, it's really, I thought I was a career woman, but now I feel mixed about going back to work. And this, on the one hand, I would love to do something for myself and not be constantly doing childcare. On the other hand, I feel guilty. So we are actually navigating a whole new identity. Yeah. There's a documentary produced by Channel News Asia a couple of years ago called Has the Internet Broken Parenting? I participated in that, and I talked a lot about this identity in the transition to motherhood. So if anybody's interested, I think that would be, it's not something that we learn about in sex ed, and it's not something we talk about because when we get pregnant, so much of the focus is on the baby and also on the physical health.
Yeah.
We don't look at what happens to you after. And postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, these are very real, and the incidence is very high.
That's super, super interesting. I'd love to take a look at the show. And All Her Fault. That's very interesting. That
Really
pop
good show.
culture is starting
Yeah.
to get it.
Yeah.
Because I do notice recently that there's an increased conversation about what you mentioned, invisible labor, and how much of that, is underlooked. And I'm curious because, coming from an American context, there's not as much sort of help to tap into.
Yeah.
But coming to Asia, there's actually this really great video that I saw. It's a birthing center. Have you seen videos of this?
In Singapore?
They're starting in Singapore,
Yeah.
but they're mostly in Seoul in Korea right
Yeah.
now. And so
Oh, like
and
the
you can do-
confinement center. You are taken care of right away.
exactly, and you can
So
pay.
they
for-
have them here now.
Oh,
Yeah.
they have them here now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, for those, especially expats moving from a Western
Yeah.
context to an Eastern context, there's more help potentially if you have
Yeah.
the money
Yeah.
to purchase services. But then there's also all of these additional, sort of things that you mentioned in terms of
Yeah.
finding a school and adjusting. Do you find that people are more or less stressed moving to Asia in general?
Complex question. And I made that kind of lifestyle calculus myself, right? I moved here the last time. I've been here 3 times. This is the longest and most permanent stay. I moved here with an 18-month-old baby. And I very much looked at what is the best place to ensure I have a good quality of life, that my finances are going to be in order, and that I am supported. For early parenthood, I would say 0 to 5, before school, this is a great place because you can replace the physical labor. You can hire the physical labor. I'm an older mom, like bending down to pick up a kid or crawl around with them is a lot more taxing than it was, when I was in my 30s or 20s, right? I remember friends who were getting a PhD while raising 3 kids and still exercising 5 times a week in grad school with no issues, right? But then by the time you hit 40, you're like, wow, every task, you feel it. So you can outsource some of the physical labor here because we have, live-in help and these confinement centers. But what you replace it with is mental labor, right? So to that kind of marital strain that comes, the majority of marriages, 2/3 to be precise, suffer a precipitous decline in marital satisfaction after the arrival of the baby.
Yeah.
A majority of them don't really come back from it. The resentment of
Oh.
when I was giving birth, you were just sitting there scrolling your phone, or, I had to tell you how to do everything. You never kind of used your brain to research it, how to wean a baby, how to sleep train, how to change a diaper. Those impacts stay. So I think it's not like in Singapore, we don't have work. We have a lot of household management work. And again, if you go out and survey 10 couples, I would say 9.5 of them are going to be like, oh, I'm the one who, delegates the task to my helper. I'm the one who coordinates the grocery shopping. And the helpful husbands will be like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's not really help, right?
Still the
It's the
emotional
brain,
part, yeah.
right? It's the brain work. So instead of dedicating 8 hours of my brain attention to my work, which maybe really fulfills me, I'm doing 20 minutes here, texting my school teacher, doing another hour, and then texting for a play date, and then coordinating with my helper what to make for the kids for dinner. All of that is scattered throughout my day. From a productivity perspective, we know that that's very different from getting into a deep focus zone. Right.
That's so fascinating. I didn't know that after the drop, it never really came back.
Yeah, and this
Marital
is,
satisfaction.
and I'm glad you bring that up, because in this environment in Singapore, we are still very much working with a traditional culture style of communication and managing emotions. So most traditional culture, and it doesn't have to be Asian, right? You may find some Eastern European families like this. I'm married to a Brit. They're very much, culturally wired to be think about duty, keep calm, carry on, don't raise a fuss. People don't talk about uncomfortable things. They kind of assume it'll pass. But emotion, I like to describe it. Imagine if you had a 24-ounce steak and you didn't really chew it, it's just going to sit in your stomach and cause you indigestion. The only way to properly have it digest is to chew it up, right? Dice up the little pieces, properly chew, and then it can, absorb more easily. Same with emotion. So many of my couples, I have clients who are in their 70s, and I have clients who are in their 20s doing more preventive work, which is the best kind of work, by the way. And they will all point to moments that go back to usually the arrival of a child. They'll be like, and I still remember. And for one partner, it'll be like, why are you still holding on to that? It's because the mind encodes. We hold on to memories until we can make sense of them. And in a marriage construct, the nonsensical thing is, if you love me, how could you let me suffer on my own? If you love me, how could you not help? I can't reconcile this. You put so much energy into your work. Why didn't you, put some energy into maintaining our relationship or maintaining our family? Human beings are sense-making creatures, right? We are alone and unique amongst animals in that we don't just feel and do and then it's done. We think. And the thing that drives us crazy is when we cannot make sense of something. So to make sense when it's a relational problem, we need to kind of discuss, and I understand your perspective and you understand mine, then we can tell a story around, oh, he didn't mean to do X, it was because he didn't know, oral history, right? As long as humans have been civilized, we tell stories by the fire. It's a way of coping with life, right? Understanding why we're here, why bad things happen, what good things mean, all of that.
Oh, I love it.
It's getting very metaphysical.
No, but I love it. It's a human story, and
It
all
is,
of us.
yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about, the range of your clients. You said it was from 20s to 70s, and preventive work, the younger you are, the better, right? Getting ahead of some of these things. So for expats, right, who are maybe hearing about some of these struggles, how do you recommend they design or put in some safeguards, right, when they first move,
Yeah.
so that they can do that preventative work?
Yeah.
What's like your top sort of recommendation there?
I think we're all, especially nowadays, very good at managing all of the physical, seeable things, right? We will sign up for a gym, get our apartment sorted. If we have kids, we'll sign up for a school. We'll go show up at the job, make sure we ramp up and, show that we're good, we're integrating. We often neglect the things that we cannot see. And community is the number one most important thing for human well-being, right? One study I like to cite often is the Harvard study of adult development. The current clinical director is Dr. Waldinger. His famous quote is, the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. What he's not saying is that there is a lot of medical advice, right? In that study, medical metrics. They revisit every 5 years the samples. I think the sample's been in the study for 90 years now. Many of them have died. But the medical data also shows those who have happy, connected relationships live longer, whereas those who are more isolated, live for a shorter amount of time. So when I sit down with clients, and I actually do have clients, myself and members of my team, who have arrived and on their first month to-do list is finding a therapist, right? Some people who are not used to the idea of therapy might be like, well, that sounds crazy. I'm like, wow, amazing, right? You knew that you're going to be in a new place, that you might have difficulties and you don't know who to go to.
Yeah.
So to establish that relationship so you don't have to go into the emergency room being like, oh my gosh, my arm's falling off. I don't know who can help me.
Yeah.
You're like, here's somebody that I can go to before my arm falls off. If I have a little bit of pain, I'm going to go talk to them. So I encourage my clients to do basically a social support map, which identifies, let's take me, my demographic. I've got kids, I've got a job, I've got a husband, life is complex. I need same-sex friends that I can, go out to and commune with. I need couples friends that help my husband and I go out and feel like we are partners and not just parents, have a good time, have a laugh, right? It strengthens the marriage. He needs his same-sex guy friends, people to talk to about issues that, maybe they can't relate to, right? To their female peers. We need play date friends, right? Sort out people that I can call upon and say, oh, school's closed tomorrow. Do you want to get the kids together? Ideally, we have friends that we can take a family vacation with so that the kids can play together and we can also relax instead of chasing the kids around on a holiday and everybody goes back to work saying the holiday, I need a vacation from the holiday, right?
Yeah.
We need career, mentors. We need so many different things in life. And it's easy when we're in college. You're making friends. It's still easy when you're early career because everyone's got time and everyone wants to help. But the older and older you get, the harder and harder it is to make friends. So be intentional about it. Not every friend has to be perfect, and you don't need a single friend that serves all purposes, right? My best kind of heart-to-heart friends, none of them live here. But, I'm not looking at 45 for a heart-to-heart best friend. That's kind of hard. It'd be great if it happened. But I have those people that I can WhatsApp for support. But here I do have, I'm conscious I need to socialize and get out and just have a laugh.
Yeah.
So, we can have casual friends, and if they develop into best friendship, amazing. Right? So actually draw out a map, be intentional about your supports. When we study the effect of loneliness and isolation, it does register on the body, in the brain, as a punch to the chest, right? These are actual studies that have been done. So I think isolation is actually the number one health challenge for human beings, and it's one of the most difficult things for us to reconcile. Therefore, think about not being isolated.
Yeah.
Who do you need in your corner, and set that up within, you don't have to get it all done, but lay out the map for what you want to find in terms of community within your first 90 days in a country.
Wow. That's, I've never heard of that sort of map out, but it's really good because I always envision these different pillars of my life, like, health and wellness and career, and finding, different friends for each spoke of the wheel, so to speak.
For sure.
It'd be great to map out.
From a professional perspective, some people call it like a personal board of directors, right? If you're more like kind of career minded, maybe that term appeals to you.
Right.
So that you need different people for different kinds of support and advice. Yeah. So go find them. Your board of directors doesn't just magically come together, right? You're a founder, so that you intentionally go and say, this person's great at fundraising, this person has subject matter expertise, this person's very technical, and they can help you. Same with your social life. This person has been a parent, so they understand, the parenting issues, and maybe they can even give me some advice or commiseration. This person, has lived and done some of the things that I want to do, so, maybe they're going to be like your mentor type of person.
Right.
Map those out.
The very first time that you moved abroad, so in your case, 18 from China to over to Stanford, if you had to write a letter to younger Chi, what would be in this letter?
There's a radio show in Singapore hosted by Joel Chua. It's actually titled Letter to My Younger Self.
Oh.
I was on his program last year. And it's around this topic, right? It's a very interesting show, so I encourage you to go and listen to it.
Yeah.
I think what I want to say now versus what I said on his program last year is still essentially the same, right? When you're young, you're so busy fitting in, assimilating, that you kind of internalize a lot of the flaws and faults. And what I want to say to younger Chi is, if you feel like you're doing something wrong, it may not be the case. It may be that you're ahead of your time. You see something that other people don't see yet. It may be that you're in the wrong group, right? If you're a finance person wondering, you know, how come I can't paint every day? Maybe you need some painter friends, right? The problem may not be you. It may be that you're unique and special. And, you know, stop trying to whittle away those edges around you that make you unique so that you look like, you know, everybody else. Actually engage in those edges, be curious, explore, try the things out before you form a judgment about what's wrong with you. The less PC version of that in mental health circles is don't diagnose somebody with depression if they're surrounded by assholes, right? They don't have to be surrounded by assholes. It's just if you're a muggle and, you know, if you're a magician in a society of muggles, well, of
Yeah.
course you'll feel weird, but
Yeah.
maybe you're special.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chi. I appreciate you
You're
coming
welcome.
and sharing
Yeah.
your time and
It's fun.
expertise with us.
I'm looking forward to watching your episode.